That's the oldest friend who we just lost about 4 weeks ago.
Right. Hey, persons! You know, that was Rudy's greeting. I'm not sure how I got to know Rudy, since he never really came into my life. Rather, he was always there. As a young lad, after he escaped the confines of Rat Hollow, he was a neighbor to my dad, and they did a lot of growing up together. As neighbors, Bob and Rudy worked together on the threshing crews that worked all the neighborhood farms for the oats and then for the fall harvest of shocking corn. They collaborated during harvest times, with Rudy furnishing the Gale chopper, Bob the Ellis-Chalmers combine, Rudy the John Deere baler, Bob the New Idea corn picker. But their crowning achievement, their proudest moment together, was a shared implement used as a power source for running anything with a PTO shaft, thus reducing the need for another tractor. The two chums, chucking incessantly, scavenged both farmstead for junked items that could be repurposed, refashioned, and welded together. A Model T axle and transmission, complete with wire wheels, for reducing speed, old pulleys, a couple of belts, anything that made sense that was lying in their junk piles. This wondrous mishmash, which remarkably worked as intended, was christened by the gleeful partners as the Morphodite. Rudy would call Dad, exclaiming, "Rob, I need a Morphodite today." Rudy told me he'd never gone beyond the 8th grade because he had to work in the farm, but that fact seemed to burn in his mind because for the rest of his life, he was a sponge for information. He always said, if you can't learn at least one thing every day, then what the hell good are you anyway? He was thrilled to be able to get a computer and be on the internet because he could and did look up any topic that came to mind, and he had plenty of topics. Just the fact that he could punch a word or a phrase and find out tons of information would boggle his mind. He would shake his head and say, "Ain't that something?" Rudy had a great thirst for knowledge, never figuring he was too old to learn anymore. He was always on the hunt for any kind of news or information that would expand his tiny brain, as he put it. When he told you this newfound information, he would just say, "Don't brag, just fact." After school, my new wife, a local farm girl and fellow classmate, and I started farming with Mom and Dad. On any given day, Rudy and Armin Meyer, lovingly called Insect, could be seen driving into our farm in Monticello, and it didn't matter what was going on, because we had to stop and visit with the boys, even if it was only for a little while. Talk was about the weather, crops, family, and Ellis-Chalmers tractors, since we all had some model of that brand. Some of these days, page change. Some of these days when he visited were pretty kind of crappy or rotten because we had breakdowns. But when Rudy left, we had a different attitude and made you smile for the rest of the day. He had that effect on you. And his reply was always, "It might not be great today, but it beats the hell out of the alternative." Meaning he could be pushing daisies or taking a dirt nap, as he put it. Rudy was the eternal optimist. When he left a whirlwind after a visit, it seemed like I was always laughing or at least smiling. He had that ability, and that's a great trait to have. He'd bring his big old telescope over several times for us to see the stars. That was a big deal for our two kids. One, because they got to stay up late, and two, because Rudy taught them about the stars and planets. I remember that being a big part of his life, that up in the sky there was infinity and beyond. He could not imagine how many universes there were out beyond our own. About that same time, Rudy invited me and my young son to go to the EAA convention in Oshkosh. We had a wonderful day with Rudy pointing out many new things, as he would say, and turned us out of the world of planes. As an added bonus, Rudy did give me a subscription to some airplane magazine because he wanted us to be informed about air travel since he was a pilot himself, and I never forgot that generosity. Mom died 21 years ago, and Rudy became almost inseparable with Dad. They traveled wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and the absolute best thing for Dad at that point was Rudy being during that time. They did, as they called it, right-left driving, meaning they turned down any road that promised adventure, even if it was just to learn what kind of crop was growing in that particular field. Their driving didn't consist of hitting major cities, rather just the opposite. They were a couple old farm boys driving all the back roads of rural America. They stopped at the diners in any small town and made friends with all the local people in the eatery in whatever town they stopped. I remember Dad was in several fender benders in his later years. They always seem to be with Rudy. Dad always said Rudy just stopped in the middle of the road when they saw something in the street. Interesting. It kind of makes you wonder just what kind of driving they were doing. Later on, I started a construction business, and Rudy still came to the office for a quick visit. I had a partner after many years of doing my own business, and when Rudy came bounding in the office, the laughing started and the work stopped. He would hit on all the high notes about the old days, and I could recite many of the old sayings because I had heard them so many times before when he and Dad were talking. In 20 or 30 minutes, he would abruptly get up and walk out, yelling that he'd have been here long enough, he'd heard enough of my bullshit. Now, my business partner didn't know Rudy. He simply stared at us during the laughing sessions. And when Rudy left, my partner just said, "What the hell was that?" I replied, "That was Rudy." In the last few years, Dad and Rudy were both kind of crippled old men who had left behind a lifetime of hard work and many, many fond memories together. But Rudy never slowed down. In fact, he was chauffeuring old people around up until he was about 90 years old. I asked him how old these old people were, considering his own age. He laughed his little hee-hee laugh and admitted that most of the people were younger than he was. Some people thought Rudy was nuts to be doing all his travels anymore and should just sit back and enjoy his remaining years, but that was never Rudy's way. All of his travels and driving was Rudy's way of keeping young, and it kept him going even after he found out he had cancer. Dad died June 30th this year, and Rudy was probably the first person my wife called the next morning. My brother and I were in charge of all the arrangements, and we were frazzled at that time, but Joni, my wife, knew enough to contact Rudy right away. He called me the next day and spoke so very kindly to Dad that I knew it was from the heart. He always referred to Dad as Rob. Every other person I knew called him Bob, but not Rudy. To Rudy, he was Rob. He sadly said he would not be able to attend Dad's funeral, but he would see him soon enough anyway. Rudy died 4 weeks to the day after Dad. So now we're thinking maybe the two of them had some kind of plan up their sleeves all along, so they could be together again and head down the big roads in the sky doing the right-left driving again. We figure they're probably looking down at all of us now and laughing. I'll end this with one of Rudy's favorite quotes, spoken right before he'd get up and abruptly leave. "Shut up, I've had enough. I got more important things on my mind." Thank you.